Canadian history reveals how Canadian Christians have adopted beliefs and values that are offensive to the gospel. How was this possible? What was it about their theology and their understanding of the Bible that facilitate the adoption of these beliefs and values? Christians in Alberta and British Columbia must have supported the passing of eugenic laws by their governments. Alberta passed the Sexual Sterilization Act in 1928. William Eberhardt, a devout Christian, Presbyterian minister and teacher, known as Bible Bill, served as Minister of Education and then Premier from 1935 to 1942. Under his leadership, the sexual sterilization law was enhanced and refined. He apparently saw no contradiction in supporting the law and his biblical faith. Christians adopted beliefs that entitled them to think that they could and that they also had the right to declare men and women feeble-minded and then sterilize them without their consent or even their knowledge. Tommy Douglas, a Baptist minister who became Premier of Saskatchewan, wrote a master's thesis that promoted the belief that eugenics could improve society. He later disavowed the views he had promoted in his thesis. The biblical interpretation that led Christians not only to support, but to enact these views of social Darwinism into legislation. What was it? Social Darwinism was popular the early part of the 20th century and was perceived as providing a scientific basis for eugenics and also for racism. Over the years, these beliefs have been shown to be false, but they still persist even to today. As a child growing up in South Africa, I remember being told that the reason the black South Africans could not be given the vote was they were not as evolved as the whites. They were perceived as low on the evolutionary scale, closer to the primates. This belief still persists today. Michelle Obama was photoshopped to look more like a primate. In Europe, spectators have thrown bananas onto the football field when there are African players on the team. When the skull Homo naledi was discovered in 2017, there was a Facebook post comparing this fossil to Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe. The Nazis used social Darwinism to justify their genocide of Jews. Racism has found its supporters among the theologians as well. In South Africa, the Dutch Reformed Church gave its full support to apartheid, while some of their theologians tried to provide theological rationalizations for this racist policy. It is easy to focus only on members of the Dutch Reformed Church and ignore that there were many Christians from other denominations who voted for the apartheid government as well. How could Christians be so blind? Was there something in their theological and biblical interpretations that provided justifications for their racist views? One can find a number of reasons for this blind spot, but I will focus only on one. Christians bought into racist beliefs of social Darwinism because they believed the lie of a murderer. The lie was propagated in the church from pulpits and is now believed to be God's word. To uncover this lie, we need to examine the biblical story of Cain and Abel in Genesis 4, 1-16. Adam and Eve had two sons, the oldest Cain, who worked the soil in verse 2, and the younger was Abel, a shepherd, also according to verse 2. Each brought an offering to God. Cain brought an offering from his garden, while Abel offered the firstling of his flock, as well as tasty pieces, according to verse 4. God approved of the offering brought by Abel, but not that of Cain. Cain is overcome with anger and jealousy and asks Abel to go with him to a field, where he murders his brother. God asks Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" Note that God persists to refer to Abel as Cain's brother. Cain lies to God and responds, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" The Revised Standard Version. This translation of the question, "Am I brother's keeper?" is found in the King James Version and later the Revised Standard Version of the Bible, and is only translation that is quoted. Unfortunately, it is removed from its context. The question is posed by a murderer, Cain, in order to avoid taking responsibility for his actions of murdering his brother. Furthermore, what is not noted is that God does not deign it with a reply. God does not acknowledge that Cain is his brother's keeper. Instead, God ignores the murderer's attempt to justify himself. God has not answered the murderous questions with Yes. But ironically, Christians have responded with their yes and believe that their yes is God's word. Christians have accepted Cain's attempt at justification as a fact, as God's word, even though God never said nor responded to the question. Silence is not God's word. It has become an integral part of many Christian belief systems and values. But a closer examination of this lie reveals that to be the keeper is to be in a position oneself in being in the one up position and the other in the one down position. One is in the position of authority, status and power, while the other is to be subservient and obedient and obeisant. The place where we see this stance of being a keeper is between animals and the zookeeper. This deeply ingrained attitude has led Christians to believe that they can and have the right to relate to others from a place of greater importance and status, and that they can make decisions about others since they are their keepers. It is this attitude of being my brother's keeper that has allowed Christians to tolerate the abuse of what they refer to as the feeble-minded and to institutionalized racism. It is this attitude of the keepers of others that permeated the attitudes of colonial powers and stoked the paternal racism. God continues to refer Abel to Cain's brother. God's response to Cain and to us is not that we are our brother's keeper, but that we are our brother's brother, our sister's sister, our brother's sister, and our sister's brother. This is the essence of relationship shaped by the gospel. This is the attitude shaped by the gospel and not social movements such as social Darwinism. If Christians are to combat the persistent racism in our society and in the church, they need to reject that they are their brother's keeper and to confess the abuse that they have perpetuated on those who are different and humbly live out our lives informed by the gospel. Thank you.